Next on the show on Saw You Went Viral, it's a section we call What It's Like to Go Viral. And we're joined today from Atlanta, Georgia in the US by Travis Orndorff. Travis is the son of the very famous WWF wrestler, Mr Wonderful Paul Orndorff. And he's been running a tribute account to his late father, celebrating his career and charting his moments, his famous moments, anniversaries through the years. If you're not aware of who Mr. Wonderful is, take a little look at this clip and it'll give you an idea of how amazing he was.
How can I get muscles like you guys? Wow, Mr. Wonderful!
You can start by getting in shape with the Hulkamania workout set.
Great!
It's got everything you need. Head and wristband, a jump rope for warming up, a hand gripper for power, dumbbells for strength, an exercise poster, and even Hulk's own workout tape.
The Hulkamania workout set. You from LJN.
Are you in shape yet?
Yeah!
Oh!
Travis, thank you so much for joining us today at this early time for you. For those who may not be a bigger wrestling fan as me, Hannah, I'm sorry, just tell us a little bit about your dad.
So my father started out in wrestling in 1976, the Brandon Bowl. He's from Brandon, Florida, and just an amazing athlete that then transitioned to the WWF as Mr. Wonderful. He wrestled there for a good 8 years and then moved over to WCW. So he headlined WrestleMania. He was also he wrestled Hulk Hogan, I think, for the title. The record, I understand, is 11 times. So quite proficient and relevant in early WWF history, as Vince McMahon, obviously has turned this into a totally different world.
And tell us a little bit about then the tribute accounts that you've set up for him, or that have been set up for him, why you chose to set them up, and a little bit about why they've helped you in some way as well on a personal level.
Sure. So the background would be, my father told me when I was very young, and I've said this multiple times, that one day I would tell his story. And I didn't really understand it, but as I got older, I understood that there were things he told me that nobody else knew. And one of the things he always wanted me to do was something online, but that's not something I ever did. I've never been on social media really. And the only reason I even had an account at my dad's passing was because of that current situation I was in. Somebody talked me into it. When I took my father in and, went through the funeral, and I saw kind of the outpouring that I didn't anticipate, that became, I don't know how else to say it, but I wanted to write a love letter to my dad so that people could understand. When somebody passes, you figure out all the stuff you meant to tell them. So this was an opportunity to tell that, right? So I was fortunate that a fan reached out to me and said, "Hey, if you will handle the communication, the messaging, the verbiage, everything, I'll do the archiving." So, it was one of those connections through a fan online. And, we started this journey, and I knew I had a vision for how I wanted to communicate it. And at the end of the day, I wanted it to be about who my father was, a man, because if you look at the shirt, obviously you can see, his physique. What you don't understand is he grew up, impoverished. He lived in poverty. He worked from a very young age. He was physically and verbally abused and emotionally abused. He became Mr. Wonderful as a way to escape that childhood trauma. So what I know as my father and Mr. Wonderful, people see the figure, but what they don't understand is the human being that became that and how it and what it required.
And did you know that about your dad before social media and before these tribute accounts and stories from fans came to the fore?
So here's what I would say, because when I started this, I was writing a love letter to my father. What I didn't anticipate was what I would receive in return. And
Take your time.
Yeah. I know it's difficult, even, you know,
it's a good cry. It's just,
I know.
so just refresh me real quick.
Yeah. So you were talking about the fact that so many people had, obviously there were so many stories about your dad, and the fact that his own life history had been difficult and complicated. And I just wondered whether you knew about that before fans had reached out to you and told you so much more about your dad.
So I would say yes and no. That's where I was going before I lost my composure and what I'd receive in return. What I knew was my dad's story, right? So I knew about his childhood. I knew everything that made him the man and father, which is really what I wanted people to know, was that side of his humanity. You saw the intense, well, he loved me just as intense as he wrestled, if not more. And so that was my message, right? I noticed that nobody really paid attention to my personal post. So I had to layer them in to figure out how to get buy-in so that people understood why I was doing it. And what came from it that I didn't expect from fans was, through my childhood, I could name the number of holidays Dad wasn't there, or I can name multiple events he wasn't there. He was always present, if that makes sense. I always felt like he knew what was going on in my life. So I never felt like that distance I think some children might have felt growing up with somebody that was famous. I always felt like he was there, and I don't know why. I still feel that way. And what I found out was, all those times that I was alone, missing my father, he was with other people impacting their life. Like, it wasn't like he was hanging out in the hotel room and just working out, 24 hours a day. And I remember the first story. It was from somebody that was about my age, and late 40s. And he ran into my dad after an event, and my dad had a towel on, still in his tights. Like, he's getting out to escape because obviously all the hostility. And I don't think people, like, we had death threats. I was threatened, the whole 9 yards. Anyway, these two kids went up to him. They were 15 years old, went up to my dad and said, "Can we get your autograph, Mr. Wonderful?" And he said, "Nope, but I'll take you to dinner." And he took these two boys to dinner and bought them pizza and sat there and talked to them about their workout program, why to obey their parents, how school was the first one. So, like, all the messages that he gave me, he gave to them. And so when you have an emptiness inside of you that you can't reconcile or don't really fully understand, receiving that brought me closure and, honestly, purpose behind those sacrifices that I remembered having for my father, because it felt like a sacrifice for income or for a job. But in reality, he was out impacting more lives in a greater way than I could have ever fathomed, not in just such a big level, but even at a micro level.
You said in your letter to fans, when you said about you handing over the accounts a month or so ago, you talked, obviously they're very positive about the fan interactions with your dad, but obviously you said in your letter how you grew to hate the fans because they took him away from you. How has the account helped you to kind of reconcile with that?
Well, I think number one, I only saw the intense fanatic piece. I never, and when they're in a stadium or in those situations, it's a very emotionally intense environment, more than people can anticipate. These people are rabid fans. And so I never got to have a conversation with them about them as a human being, because if I interacted with them, all they wanted to talk about was my dad. So think of me as a human being. I'm still, when you get to your Paul Orndorff son or Mr. Wonderful son or Mr. Wonderful Jr., I just wanted to be Travis, right? So all that interaction I had with him, there was no association with me as a human being. But after his passing and after the funeral, as this started to grow, what floored me was the number of people, because your friends don't call. I mean, that's just you. We all know after the funeral, people just disappear. But when I say I got weekly, if not daily, and I still get texts from people checking in on me, encouraging me, thanking me, never knowing at the time that I was struggling with depression, that I was calling Tyler up in Canada going, dude, I need 2 weeks off because I can't, I'm still reconciling with my dad's passing. I'm grieving. And, you know, when I wasn't getting phone calls from friends and family, I was getting phone calls from fans.
Yeah.
And I say fans, most of them are my friends now. Like, you know, it became personal. And if you would have told me to me, like, if somebody wanted to interact with me and they're like, I want to be your friend online, I'm like, you know, this is not, like, I don't have that much time. But it became where I understood what my father was doing in his purpose. But I got to see the emotional connection that these fans had to those events. So there would be a story like, your dad was amazing. My mom took me to that event. And I got to reply, it sounds like your mom was pretty amazing too. Might want to give her a call. And I would reply back, you're absolutely right. And you know what I'm saying? So what I got to understand about all those events he was at, while I just saw fanaticism, I did not understand, obviously, as a child, the emotional connection that people had to those events in their childhood and the emotional intensity that it brought, to the point that to this day, 30 years later, I will get people say, this brought me to tears. All right, that's still the funniest thing I've ever seen. Or, oh my God, this made my absolute day. And it's not the event. It's not the wrestling. It's that piece that we connected to emotionally that brings us back to a time where we were naive and we knew who the good guys and bad guys were. It was a love letter. So anything outside of an outpouring of love and compassion for each other and for you know, our lives, for me, that wasn't going to be acceptable. And honestly, because of the situation I was in my mental state, I couldn't handle it. So to me, that toxicity would have brought me to the level I could not handle, because at the time, that positivity I was receiving was a lot of times the only thing keeping me going.
Just to end things on a positive, Travis, I think, you know, calling it a love letter, I think, is just beautiful, because it is. And I think what's amazing about it, the account that now, as you said, Travis in Canada helps run for you, is celebrating the amazing things and about your dad's career. And what I find as well with doing my own wrestling account is just helping new generations learn about someone as important and as amazingly talented as your dad, to a whole different audience. This is 35 years later. It took 2 generations of people who may not have known. And I think that's what's brilliant, is keeping his legacy alive and celebrating the great things about it. And again, that positives of helping you come closer to fans and with your dad as well. It's just a brilliant thing. So thank you so much for your time today. Really, really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Travis.
Thank you so much, guys. You have a wonderful morning.